there are 25 names that reappear in a different order than it did last year. So that was quite a challenge this spring and this summer, but we have 4 or 5 new ones to the district that I want to introduce. So I'll start right here. Chris Valley comes to us from Sioux Falls.
Yep, Sioux Falls.
And he's gonna be assistant, he's gonna be special ed at the high school and assistant boys soccer. Rebecca Sadler, she comes to us from Mount Marty, Mitchell. She is gonna be assistant girls tennis and assistant gymnastics, and she is gonna teach 2-3 center? Fourth grade. You're new, but everybody knows you. Here's a new one. Whitney McDonald, she works at American Bank and Trust. She's not new to Huron, but she's from Watertown, but she works at American Bank and Trust, and she is going to be head cheer and assistant competitive dance. Abby, I had to get this right now. Hayenge,
Yep.
comes to us from Minnesota. She's going to be assistant varsity volleyball and 8th grade girls basketball. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay, I only gave you 2. Did I miss any other new ones? We have a lot of other changes, but I think everybody knows everybody else. So welcome the new ones to our district. I do have a handout for tonight, but I'll hand that out as you leave. It's very familiar to the last year. What I'll probably do is when Mr. Nebelsek's done, I'll just give this to you. I'll probably talk about a couple things that I just want to highlight, and then you can look at it on your own. I probably will have the new teachers and coaches stick around, and I can answer some questions and go through some of the stuff in more detail with them. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Nebelsek, and he can have the floor for as long as he has.
Go back over to the side, how long I got. Good evening. It is a pleasure to be here, and I have spent a lot of time preparing for this. I did not see it coming when Mr. Roder asked me if I would do this. I did it in my 3rd year here, so that means that it's been 22 years since I've addressed the coaching staff. I'm going to do some introducing that if those that have shared my life the last 25 years say, well, that isn't accurate, then correct me right away. But I want the new ones to understand a little bit about where I come from historically, and then I want to get to what I have to offer. Okay? I know how unique this opportunity is. Again, only twice in my career here. And although I address other coaching staffs and other administrative teams, and I this year I'll speak to 4 different faculties in the next 3 weeks. Speaking to my own coaches means a lot to me. On the lighter side, I'm adjusting to a new life. The love of my life has retired, and she's doing the things she wanted to do for 41 years and has waited, and now I'm adjusting. She's been in our house 6 nights since June 19th when she retired. The rest of the time she's been with her sisters or her grandchildren or her children. She loves being grandma and mom. She also loves her flower garden, okay? So when I've been here without her, I've learned for the first time how to water flowers. She told me exactly what to do. She said, I want you to lift the leaves and water the stems. And I said, Diana, I think I'm just gonna do like God does in a rainstorm, and I'm just gonna stand there and let it rain. And she said, Terry, you're not God. Lift the leaves and water the stems. And that's not made up. That is word for word how it came down. But it reminded me that tonight, my perspective means a lot to me. But I'm not God. I'm one perspective, and it'll be the perspective that I share, and hopefully it'll have some value. Secondly, there are people in this room who know about my passion, and they know that I have a passion for doing this, for making a difference. And when young people ask me in the classes at the middle school, they interview me each year, why do you continue to do this? I said, because I love to influence. That is the driving force long after I've gotten to the point in life where I can make decisions based on what I would like to do. You know, I talk to my wife all the time that if tomorrow was the last day, I don't want anybody to think, oh, I bet he wished he'd retired 3 years ago or whatever. I'm doing exactly what I want to do and trying to make the most of it. There are people in this room who've coached, well, I've been the principal and now the superintendent for 25 years. Lauren's in the room. He's been an administrator with me from day 1. So it goes back a long time. So I hope that what I have is credible. Now, for those who don't know, because you're new, I'm not just a bureaucrat coming from the office. So I do want to share a few of those things just so the youngest people in the room understand the perspective. I was honored as a kid to play in the state tournament, although for a Class B team. I think I am still the youngest, or one of the head coaches that's the youngest in the history to coach in the state basketball tournament. I was a position coach in state football championships in the Dome in their 3rd year of existence. I coached track athletes to state medals. I was an AD for 8 years. I reffed high school and college basketball for 35 years, including 19 state tournaments and 6 state championship games. And I'll share this at the beginning, and then I'll wrap it up at the end so you'll know when I'm getting near the end, okay? I want our programs to be the best. I'm in it to win it. I want our student athletes to experience winning, and I want us to embrace competing at the highest levels. A lot of what I say between now and the end won't sound like that, but all of those things can be integrated in and still have the desire to win. There's been 2 things that motivated me in the past 2 weeks as I traveled and then quietly would write at night, because we just got back a couple hours ago from Weston's 2nd birthday. And the first was a leadership seminar for superintendents in which it was hammered home that this was to all the superintendents in the state. If you're the boss of any organization, a school or any other, you have skills, experience, and philosophy that are the core values of your organization, then you have a responsibility to teach those skills, those experiences, and those values to your employees, and if you refuse to teach them, you are negligent, okay? That was just drilled into our heads, okay? And the second is a court case that's happening in our region. I hope it never gets completely out in the open, because it's complicated when it involves kids, teachers, coaches, etc. But in this case, I have seen the pre-lawsuit. And in the pre-lawsuit, if they can show that, in this case, the coach or the principal or the AD, I don't want to get more specific than this, did these things which could be termed as harassment, he or she will be sued. And if the principal in charge or the AD in charge cannot prove that they trained those people in the anti-harassment, in the freedom of speech, and the fundamental rights, they will be sued for damage. And if the superintendent of schools cannot prove that he evaluated and monitored every principal and AD to make sure that they taught the rights, the responsibilities, and the harassment, then he will be sued for monetary damages, okay? So, it is my business. It's my livelihood and it's my responsibility to do this and to teach you the best that I can. The final caveat, if the Board of Education cannot prove that they evaluated the superintendent to make sure he was doing all the things mentioned above, they can be sued. I try to model how I want you to teach and coach. So here's the objective for this evening's presentation. As a result of this session, I want the coaches to be better equipped to professionally handle, to properly respond, and to enthusiastically embrace the standards of the Huron Tigers athletic program. I plan to cover the following areas: branding initiative, communications, the reality of attrition, tech-supported athletics, performance-based playing time, coach's memory, and then I plan to challenge you at the end all about relationships and what will last in your career. So here we go. Considering branding. I'm really excited about the iconic H with the Huron and the Tiger Claw. But it means nothing without the words pride, respect, excellence for all. And that's who we are, that's what we're going to stand for, and that's what every decision is going to be based at. And when the community quits fighting over the tiger face, we'll put a tiger face on the body and we'll rah-rah and we'll go ahead. But that's not what the brand was about. The brand was about that H and that Huron and that tiger stripe, okay? And that if we're going to do that, we're going to display the excellence and commitment that our athletes deserve if they're going to be in our programs. I think that that along those lines, we have some other things that are a brand of Huron that are the model in the state. Believe you me, how you handle yourselves is a brand of Huron. When I get calls about how your kids were in a hotel room, that's a brand of Huron. How you dress, your attire when you represent the Tigers is a brand of Huron. How you conduct yourself in settings that are seen by other members of the community is a brand of Huron. How you react under pressure is a brand of Huron, and your ability to show unconditional love to every kid, whether they help you succeed or cause your record to not be so good, is a part of our brand. Second thing I want to talk about is communications with students, with parents, with administrators, and with other coaches. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later in detail, but communications does not have to do with giving a speech. Communications does not have to do with your ability to just get your point across and everyone's supposed to quietly obey. Communications is for you to be in tune with who you're communicating with and them in tune with you so that lives are changed in the long haul because we had activity programs. I want to speak about the reality of attrition and community support for tax-supported athletics. And I learned this from Roger Lonbakken, who was a principal in, I heard him give a speech, and he was a principal in Pier Rakes in my first year as principal. That's 36 years ago, okay? And Roger Lonbakken said this of any AA school. He said, if you start out with 100 little boys in 4th grade or 100 little girls in 4th grade, and you are highly successful, and you have 10 of them on your varsity, okay? Their senior year, which is unbelievable. If you could pull out 10 to be on your varsity, that means 90 kids and their parents started out in your program, and somewhere along the way ended their participation. And how you treated each of those 90 kids, whether it was when it ended in 4th grade, whether it was when it ended in 7th grade, whether it was when it ended after their sophomore year, is your legacy. And the community's support for athletics and taxes are going to be based on the feeling of those parents whose kids didn't make it all the way to the varsity. So that's what I would challenge you to do, is create friendships and legacies along the way. I measured, and I've said this at other schools, I measure my kids, teachers and coaches by who they invited to their weddings and to their graduations. Because those were in the high school faculty, I'd tell them every year that I had a wedding or a graduation coming up. I'm not inviting any of you. Because if I invite one and not the other, why? So if you got an invitation, you got it from my kids. It had nothing to do with me, you got it from my kids. And many times my kids invited people who had not played them, had cut them, had redirected them to another activity. So it isn't all just play, but it's how are human beings treated and what becomes a part of their legacy. I want to talk about tax-supported athletics for a minute. We are getting closer and closer and closer to the day when we should not spend 1 penny on taxpayer athletics and turn it all over to clubs. Because if we're not able to distinguish what we do differently than clubs, then we shouldn't waste the taxpayers' money. We should not waste their money. Now I hope 100 years from now, coaches have continued to do things in tax-supported athletics that are so above and beyond reproach, so unconditional loving, so direct in their training and their preparation and their protection of kids that we can't afford not to have tax-supported athletics. But if we let the whole club mentality and the people who have the most money get the most influence and get to have their kids play, might as well be clubs, because they can afford it. They can afford it. We have to make sure that our playing field is based on unconditional love for every child. And then, and I think that those who've been with me the longest know, I'm not afraid to go get money for facilities and uniforms and travel and charter buses. I'll go to bat, and I'll go to bat, and I'll go to bat so that we go down the road rolling with pride. But we have to continue to distinguish what we do as educational coaches compared to what goes on with the rest of it. These are zigzagged as they meant something to me. They may not be a pattern that you follow, but those who've been with me know they're coming, okay? Performance has to be the sole thing that bases playing time. Performance. And so I want to talk about things that I've seen over the years as I've refereed the Gary Munsons and the others all across the state, the college coaches, okay? The common denominators about what they do or don't do when it comes to performance-based, okay? We cannot decide way early who's going to play and who's going to fail, because you're cheating yourselves out of how well your team can be, and you are cheating the kids out of how far they can grow. One thing that goes back with me all the way to high school is that I had a high school coach, and we averaged 18 wins my junior and senior year. But that coach, sometimes I thought too long, but it was a mystery who was gonna start, okay? He was kind of a scholarly gentleman, but it was a mystery who was gonna start, because it was based on practice that week and how hard you practiced. And so we didn't have any trauma during those 2 years or those 36 wins or whatever it was by, there's a different starting lineup. Because we played, who played the hardest, who practiced the hardest, etc. Now, does the coach have the discretion for what he knows from past experience as to who comes through in the pressure? Absolutely. Does the coach have the right, based on practice and based on a pattern of things for that coach, for her to decide who's gonna be in there in the clutch? Absolutely. But we have to make sure that we are current in basing the performances of who's gonna play and who's not gonna play. We need to let each student athlete's practice and performance and game decide their playing time and decide their role on the team. And we just have to be open to that. One of the things that Dr. Zitterkoff taught me many, many years ago is that we have to be careful with teachers, and we have to be careful with coaches, and we have to be careful with student athletes, that we don't already decide the destiny and then coach or teach in order to reach the destiny that we predicted, okay? And this is what I learned, and I watched it as my own children went through. If we thought these kids were kind of special, and so they had more playing time, and maybe they moved up, which is something else I'll talk about later, it's amazing that we will continue to forgive and forgive and forgive their mistakes, because more times than not, they've come through for us. And because of that, they know that. And they play with confidence because of that. Classic example of that is I coached youth for a long time with my kids. My kids were tiny like Diana, never started a game for the Tigers in any sport, okay? But they would play unbelievably well if Dad was the coach in youth. Why? Because they weren't worried about what the coach thought. They knew they were gonna get to play. Of course, I played everybody pretty even, but they knew, I'm not one mistake from being pulled out and never getting to play again. But if we don't watch that with a mature attitude to go to every single child and go, what if that's my son? What if she's my daughter? Am I treating that girl or that boy the same way as if they were my flesh and blood? When we can do that for the least of the kids on the team, everybody will play better. Everybody will play better. But kids watch our vibes, and they watch us. Those who put up with me in the high school have heard me quote before about TESSA research. TESSA research showed that the kids who always got the right answers, we'd give them longer to get the answer, because we knew they'd probably come up with the answer and then make us feel better as a teacher, okay? But the kid who historically didn't get the answer, we'd give them less than half the time to answer it, because we really didn't think they'd answer it anyway, okay? And so research showed you've got to love and give time to those who might not think they can answer, because the one time they get it right, they can grow. You have to apply that a little bit to athletics as well, okay? I have watched coaches evolve to where kids will make a horrendous mistake, and that coach, by golly, will not take them out until they've had a chance to breathe and succeed just a moment, and then get them out of there. Man, it takes a lot of years to learn that. It takes a lot of years to learn that. So that's one of the things that I think is that we have to be current and basing our performance on who's working hard and giving kids a chance to possibly prove us wrong. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about coaches' memory. And this comes from watching great coaches and terrible coaches from all those years that I was refereeing. Great coaches must have amnesia when it comes to young people doing things wrong, when it comes to young people breaking your heart and having to be suspended for training rule violations, when it comes to parents who love their kids too much, and we all know those parents. Those parents started out as loving parents, then they became helicopter parents and hovered over their head, and then they became bulldozer parents, where they go in front of their kid and they knock down every tree in the way, fill in every valley, and smooth every hill, okay?
We know it's not good for kids. Gotta have amnesia, gotta love them anyway. We have to have amnesia when other adults break our hearts. And other adults will break our hearts. That's something in coaching that most people have no courage to go out and do, is to put your wares in front of other people and know you may succeed and you may lose, and one of you will succeed and one of you will lose when you're the head coach, right? And know that the garbage in the stands could just kill your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend. But we do it anyway. We have to have amnesia when other adults break our hearts. We have to have amnesia when we don't get everything we want, okay? We have to have amnesia. Because if we're one that gets pent up about the things that worked for us or didn't work for us, it'll drive us into huge unhappiness and cause us to make terrible decisions. And then we have to have amnesia when bosses do their job. We have to have amnesia when bosses do their job. It happens to all of us, okay? There are several people in here who were head coaches and over the course of time are no longer head coaches. They didn't do anything wrong. If they did something wrong, they wouldn't coach for me. And I tell people all the time about great coaches that are with us, and they go, why are they coaching? Didn't they used to be a head coach? Yep. Well, what's the deal now? In this town, you gotta win enough games or else somebody else's turn. But that doesn't mean they're not great people and that I don't want them with young people. And so that's why you can look at a lot of them, including some of the coaches who passed away recently, okay? And we want them in our program if they love kids and they lead. Now, who has the headache, the challenge, or the credit for being the head coach? Sometimes that works and sometimes it didn't. I was, as I said, I was a coach of the year way before I knew what I was doing. And when I really knew what I was doing, I lost my last 20 ball games, okay? And that was an unbelievable motivation to get into administration, okay? But both things, during that year, I had kids that stole rifles during hunting season. During that year, I had kids who drank just before a conference tournament. During that year, I even had cheerleaders get in trouble. My wife had to drive them home from a tournament in the middle of the year. And by the end of it, we were done. I was at a Spearfish Huron game about, and I've received cards and letters from these kids over the years, but a game and a kid of mine that had a junior on the Spearfish team saw me sitting up in the balcony. It's about 3 years ago. And he comes up and he starts to talk to me, and tears just start rolling down his eyes. He was a 2-year starter for me. I knew who he was. And I said, oh, Shane, we're okay. And his wife goes, no, we're not. And I looked at his wife, she goes, I have never met you, but I've been married to Shane for 17 years. And he's been practicing this speech for 17 years, and you're gonna listen to it, okay? And he cried, and he cried, and he talked about how he had let me down, and he talked about how my coaching career had ended because of those 20 losses, and that he was the best player on the team, which he was, and didn't work hard, which he didn't, and screwed around, which he did, and it has just drug on him for 20 years, whatever it was. Anyway, and I said, Shane, I love you. I forgave you a long time ago. You've got to forgive yourself. And then I lightened it up with something I'd practiced, because I'd seen several of these guys over the years where they'd apologize for that train wreck that took me out of coaching. And I'd say to them, quite frankly, I kind of owe you guys about $60,000 a year. And they go, what? And I go, oh, you'd have played as hard as I wanted you to play. You'd have won. I'd have thought I could coach. I'd still be coaching and I'd be broke. Instead, I had to go do something else, and I'm highly compensated with what I do, so forgive yourselves. So when people are pent up for that long, and it matters to them to let you know that how you treated them was huge, that's legacy, and that's what I want. Now, here's one that people in here that have been with it a long time know all too well. The challenge is not to compete for championships rather than build relationships. That's not the challenge. I'm not done. The challenge is not to build lifetime relationships rather than compete for championships. That's not the challenge either. The challenge is to compete for championships and build relationships. You have to do both. You have to give your kids, by your preparation, your study, your going back to school, you have to give them the best chance to compete. But the level of success of your kids also has to do with their talent. And sometimes they're gonna have talent and sometimes they're not, okay? I remember the state championships. I remember where I was, what it felt like. in a snowstorm with the volleyball team in Watertown, when nobody could get there, not even the AD, and I remember the Rapid City Civic Center in '04. I remember the moment of the championship. But if great coaching guaranteed championships, well, then I'd have a hard time remembering those moments, because we'd have 20 of them, right? I don't think that the coaches who won those years were great coaches those years, and terrible the years before, and great the years after, okay? I remember waiting and waiting and waiting and telling Dan McCarty, Dan, do you ever get top 5? That to me, whatever happens after that's gravy. We get it, we don't, but top 5 finish is incredible. I remember those, okay? But I also remember years when we struggled to get in the top 10. Did I think they were better coaches that year? No. Sometimes you're gonna have better athletes, sometimes you're gonna have less athletes. But every athlete you have ought to get the best that you have to offer. Okay, here's another heavy. I'll just read it like I wrote it. Relationships are more important than wins. Lifetime connections are important, but we must push to motivate and balance both of those with love. Will some of you lose your head coaching jobs in the future without enough victories? Probably. I know far too many coaches who have lost because of not enough wins. I know 3 of them that the names will make you chuckle. They're Terry, Larry, and Gary Nebelsick brothers. All 3 of us didn't win enough games at some point in our lives to keep a head coaching job, all right? We also had some great opportunities for wins along the way. Now, for those who lose their coaching job because they don't have enough wins over time and losses over time, they kind of fade. However, your place on our coaching staff and our belief in you and our support for you, okay, is still there. We want you in the program. I talked about that earlier. You're sitting at the table. We want you coaching and influencing our athletes. Now, will you lose your career over mistreating students? Yes, you will. You might lose your head job over not enough wins. But you will lose your career, and possibly your teaching career, over how you treat students. So, you could wind up facing court proceedings, you could lose your financial livelihood, and you could lose your reputation. Please understand, this is important. We must not have invisible kids. We know that the kids who are doing the shooting, okay, in this country are invisible. They're down, they're quiet, they're depressed, and then they finally get their moment and make sure people remember them, okay? So our job is to make sure that the children in our care, which you'll hear me say the same thing to all the teachers, but it's to make sure that we notice everyone, not just the stars, and avoid the scrubs. How you act must be able to answer the question, how you act must be able to be answering the question, can anybody do your job? I look constantly to make sure that you folks are doing things that no one else can do. And that's what makes you coaches. With the admin team, I tell the admin team, add up the salaries of the admin team, and there is a ton of money going into leadership. You flat better be able to lead. Because if you can't, and we're not earning it, I won't have you. Okay? So don't just do what anyone else can do, but separate yourself with the ability to compete with great passion, compete with great enthusiasm, and treat everyone, like the Bible, the least of the children, as if they were your own. Okay? We need to change as the students change. Okay? And again, I've already talked about giving students a chance. But students will detect what we think they're capable of, and we need to build on that. Great schools have the most effective principal. Poor schools have a least effective principal. Great activity programs have the most effective activities director. Poor programs have a less effective director. Great teams have the most effective coach, and others do not. It's a pattern. Some of you have heard this because you've been in Bible studies with me. Do not let the scoreboard lie to you. That's a fundamental. There have been people who've heard that from me every year. Forgive me, Tom and Tim and Angie. They've heard it every year, okay? Do not let the scoreboard lie to you. If you won on the scoreboard but you cheated, or you ignored the well-being of a student, or your team did not play very well, Don't let the scoreboard lie to you and think that you're successful when you know in your heart you weren't. And on the other side, if you lost on the scoreboard, but you treated every athlete with dignity and respect, you displayed sportsmanship, and you were well prepared as you could be with the talent that you had, then don't let the scoreboard fool you when you know that you competed well. How do we treat kids in every situation? Great people compare themselves to people less fortunate, and they feel blessed. Unhappy people compare themselves to people who were more fortunate and feel cheated, okay? Ineffective people do not realize how they're being received by others. Effective people understand that everybody in the room is judging them and have a real sense of how they're being perceived, okay? Does great coaching matter? As I said, yes, it does. Now I want to talk about discipline a little bit with your players, sometimes self-discipline, but I want to talk about your players, and I'll be talking to the teachers about their classrooms. When it comes to discipline, I'll be talking to principals about their teaching staffs. When it comes to discipline, don't flock shoot. Don't flock shoot. Nobody respects that, okay? Don't have 4 people who are coming, I'll tell principals, don't have 4 people who are coming late to faculty meetings and say to the faculty meetings, we need to talk about being on time at the faculty meetings. Because you got 28 people going, I was here on time, right? Same thing with coaching. Don't flock shoot. Don't say to the coaches, or don't say to your team, we're not working very hard, when everybody knows that there's 3 leaders on the team that aren't working very hard, right? Go to those kids and say, you're not working very hard. We must not flock shoot when it comes to handling the individual transgressions of humanity. We've got to be specific, we've got to be honest, and then we have to move forward. This is really important. We cannot, there's not a person in the 400 staff members that I have that I can embarrass into being a better person. Won't work, right? Not a one of you would work harder if I tried to embarrass you in order to work harder, okay? Same with your athletes. There is not an athlete that you can get to work harder for you by thinking you can embarrass them into performing harder. So please remember that. A personal measurement that I'd ask each of you to do that's just as important as a coaching evaluation or anything else would be what I am training myself when I do background checks on other people who are coming here to work, okay? You should do the background check on yourself this way. I try to ask myself a couple of fundamental questions each year. If right now I left, would Huron hire me back? Would Huron hire me back? Are there things I'm bringing to the table that the Huron Tigers and the community Huron need and would bring me back? If there are, then I want to be here. But if I can't answer that and I go, ooh, there's probably more people wishing I wouldn't than that, and I lose my confidence, then I better be looking for something else. So, this is what I ask others when I'm going. I say, if you moved to Huron and you worked for me, would you hire that teacher to work here? The one that I'm doing the background check on. I say to them, if you moved to Huron, would you recruit that teacher to come from your old town and come here to work for us? If on the list that are coming. Well, if Kansas got the second best coach in our, okay, I'll probably want them to come here. What number? I think they're in the top 25. How many coaches do you have? 27. So those are fundamental questions that we ought to ask ourselves, is that do we bring enough to the table that Huron would want us to do this if they could start all over again, okay? Keys to programs, these are the things, I'm getting close to the end. This is quite more lecture than motivating, but things I want to share today. People who know me most know that I believe that delaying moving students up ahead of their grade level is harmful to programs until it is so obvious that you have no other choice, okay? Moving kids away from their grade level to compete at a grade level above them, pre-high school is what I'm mainly talking about, until it's obvious to everyone that you simply have no choice, I think in the end causes you to lose a core of athletes that you need for your programs to be complete. Now, I'm not talking about which juniors or seniors should start, because I believe the juniors and seniors should be competing every day on who's the best player. But I believe that a sophomore or a freshman, absolutely, they can play for the Huron Tigers if they're the best player. But make sure it's so compelling that it's obvious, and then the rest of your players won't quit on you, okay? then the rest of the players won't quit on you. I think the best people in high school should play. Everybody that knows me knows that we should be very, very, very careful before we move anybody up into high school. Not because the people will say, well, it harms that kid. I'm not going there. You guys do a good job. It might not harm that student at all. So I'm not going there, all right? But it's the message it sends to the others that we really don't have hopes and dreams for you, so we might as well bag athletics and go someplace else. So I just ask you to measure that whenever you do that. My girls were playing, and Tim was a girls' coach at the time when Sioux Falls had 8th graders on all 3 of their varsity teams. Right, Tim, at that one time? All 3 of their varsity teams. And I remember that one of the coaches who I refereed college with, he was the head coach at Washington. He was very proudly telling me about the 2 8th graders out there and what they were doing, not knowing the philosophy that all my coaches in Huron knew about. And I said to him, I said, have you ever thought about co-oping? He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I'm thinking if we let Lincoln and Washington and Roosevelt co-op, maybe we could find 5 girls out of those 4,000 girls who could play high school basketball. Think we could do that? Maybe if we co-op. And Rick looked at me and he said, you don't like this, do you? I said, you're very perceptive. I don't like this. Now, they might have been the best players on the team. And if they're the best players on the team, I think they should have started 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, because it would be so obvious to everyone that they had no choice. But I believe that when we move them out of 8th grade, we tell the other 8th graders, you're not really in my plans. And so sometimes you might not have a choice, but I want you to be eyes wide open to that. And Terry, if I said anything different than you and I've talked about for 20 years, interrupt that immediately on that issue. Is that pretty close?
Yep.
Okay, all right. These are things that students would like you to know, because sometimes in the heat and pressure we forget. Students in all levels of high school sports, when surveyed, play sports for fun and to be with their friends. Too many times we forget this, that the essence of friendship and long-time relationships is enhanced when they grow up together, win together, and lose together, rather than when they're split and scramble to find themselves each year. So I just want you to be aware of that. There is a group of guys, I'm from the high school class of 74, there's a group of guys from the high school class of 74 here, played football together. I see them at Burger Plus for coffee. My goodness, you'd think they played yesterday. It's forever. I don't know if they won or lost, but I know they were teammates together. So just remember, kids play for fun. And then I'm really close to the end. Mr. Radke made this statement to me in a in-service seminar, because he meets with me in a mentorship thing every week that we're both in town on Wednesday. And he said to me the other day, he said, Mr. Nevelsak, after 5 years as principal, I've learned something about what you do that it didn't make sense to me before. I said, what's that, Mike? And he said, you never ever decide an issue until you've heard every side and you seek to understand the perspective of everyone at the table. That meant a lot to me. So I'm not here trying to get you to pat me on the back. But the point is that too many times when we're proud coaches or proud teachers or whatever, we decide how we want it to come out, and then we start listening to everybody, okay? And the whole time we're listening, we're kind of trying to position ourselves to win this debate and prove that we were right. So if there's a gift I could give you that it took me 25 years out of my 40 to figure out, is listen, try to understand. You can be just as bold with your decision at the end as you ever did. But take in everything first and then decide. Take in how much that parent loves them and then decide. Take in how broken that kid is, and you might be the only significant person in their life, and then decide, okay? And when they break training rules, put your arm around them, love them, have them sit there 4 games or whatever it is, and then have amnesia and get at it again. That's the gift I'd like to give you in your coaching and in your living. I would urge you to develop a firm foundation of what's right or wrong in your heart, a real vision for what you can do to touch the life of every student athlete, whether they start or whether they seldom play, and then make the best decision while approaching and seeking to understand the perspectives of everyone involved. This is my final paragraph. For those who know me best, you know that I like to win. For those who know me best, know that I sat with Shelley up in Watertown when Washington thumped us the first game of what used to be double elimination, and that was a snowstorm, and nobody else was going to get up there. And I remember saying to Shelley, you got him. He goes, what are you talking about? We're both a lot younger then. And I said, you got him. Washington does not want to play you again. Just go to the other round and win like crazy, and when they get back, they have no chance. I didn't know if it was gonna happen or not, but you could just feel it. And so our girls did that, went the long way through, and took the state championship from a team that was nearly undefeated that year. Because all of a sudden, they had them right where they wanted. And I can tell you, I just love to win, okay? The second perspective for those that know me best is I love to find ways to help. And I hope I'm not violating Tim too much on this, but during those days when I was principal and I was refereeing the biggest games in the state, Tim would use my perspective a step away so that he didn't waste an opportunity to close the margin on competitiveness. That fair, Tim? Mm-hmm. So he'd walk down to the end of the bench during the state finals, and he'd walk down and get that drink of water, and he'd say, talk to me. And I said, your lead is covering, your lead dog is carrying you, don't worry about him, which was a guy from Rapid City, Dave. I said, your lead dog is covering you, don't worry about him. I said, Gillis is falling apart, leave him alone, right? Don't touch him, he's falling apart, but Dave will take care of it. Okay, and he went on and coached the game. It was that close. And the only reason I say that is because I want you to know I love to win. I'll study the tiniest margins in order to try to do that. I prepared this presentation tonight with the full intention of winning, of changing minds and hearts, and growing the capacity of all of you to carry forward Tiger athletics. For those who don't think it matters, all you gotta do is look at the stadium, look at the track, look at the tennis court. I'll go to bat every time to give us the best chances that we have, okay? I want us to compete at the highest levels in leadership. I want to compete at the highest level in the legislature. I want to compete at the highest level to have the top faculty in the state. And I want to compete at creating men and women who give our students the greatest opportunity to succeed in our sports programs, to succeed in their faith, to succeed in their marriages or their relationships, to succeed in their family, and to succeed in their careers. I'm in it to win it, and if you want my guidance, I'm available. Have a nice evening.
Commissioner Neville. While I pass these out, I'll just make a few comments. Those, I've been here 27 years. Some have been here longer than I have. Mr. Neville's been here 25 years. And we've established a pretty good relationship that a lot of our philosophy is the same. And for that reason, that was one of the reasons why I asked him to come in and speak. First of all, he's an excellent speaker. But second of all, I thought it would be more value for you to hear his perspective instead of hearing it from me for the 25th year for those that have been around that long. So I appreciate that he took the time to come in and speak to you on several items. On this handout, I spent a couple hours this afternoon in my office writing down some things. Some of it's familiar from last year. So once I get it out, I'll start going through a couple things. Does everybody have one? Okay, first of all, that's my cell phone number. If you don't have it, please put it in your phone and do not be afraid to text me or call me. Don't call Darla to talk to Terry. Call Terry. Darla's too busy to be just taking messages and writing notes down. So if you want me to call you or talk to me, just text me and say, hey, is this a good time? Can you give me a call? Some of you are really good at doing that. Some of you are not very good at doing that. There's Darla's information. You can email her if you have any questions on paperwork or anything that you need her for. Go ahead and give her an email. Mr. Devilsek talked about the branding initiative. So that's the H that he was talking about in the upper left-hand corner. That, for now, is our athletic logo. So when we compete at state tournaments for basketball, volleyball, whoever asked for, when they had our old tiger head, that tiger head is gone. We don't own the tiger head. The tiger head that we use is on the floor at in Minnesota, Marshall, Minnesota. Same tiger head. But that's owned by a soccer team in England, I think, that has the rights to it. So part of our branding initiative was so we could identify something that we own and we can use it and no one else can use it. That's why I didn't put the tiger head down on the turf. Because Harrisburg found out the hard way that when you use something that's not yours, you might be in trouble. And Harrisburg had to put down a new turf field. Because the tiger head that they had, if they were using, was the Missouri tiger head. And Missouri owned that tiger head. So we are in the process, I believe, of owning all the things that we are passing in the initiative.
That's our attempt to do the paperwork, so it becomes
Right.
sanctioned. Yeah.
So, I've sent some emails out, so I'll try to keep this short, but if you are a coach and you are gonna use logos for uniforms or warm-ups or whatever, and we're paying for it through taxpayer dollars, you have to use approved branding logos. All the other stuff that's out there that's been used in the past, you can still use that. But if you're gonna have me pay for it, either the general fund or capital outlay, then it has to be the tiger paw or the H, or someday if we ever agree on the new tiger head, that one. Okay? So I just wanna make that clear on the branding initiative. I believe we have a meeting again tomorrow, and the discussion topic is gonna be the tiger head. And we'll figure out what we're gonna do with that. I don't need to talk about travel lists other than you're doing, from the travel department, you're doing a great job. I don't get them all the time. I would like to get your travel list, but as long as Kathy Bostrom, who is the new transportation director now, as long as you get her the list, and you get the list to the high school office or middle school office, depending on what age group of athletes you're taking with you, then you're covered. But we have to have those travel lists for liability reasons. God forbid we ever have an accident, but we need to know who's in the Suburban and who's on the buses.
Yeah, I'll jump in just because I'm here, but like if I'm going to a meeting and all of a sudden, the Brookings superintendent, or if I go south and Jen comes from T, I call and let transportation know there's another soul on board. We have the responsibility of whatever vehicle's going down the road, that we know souls on board. And our insurance and our leadership has allowed that you can take, with cause, spouse or a child or whatever, but the superintendent has to approve it, and that puts the soul on board. Am I doing that?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
As far as the activity association, regardless of what you're coaching, you should probably be looking at your section. If you're the golf coach or if you're a football coach, go to the activity association, go to the handbook of football and start reading through that, because there are new rules that happen every year. I don't care if you're a 7th grade coach or if you're the head coach. You have the responsibility to know the rules of the sport that you are coaching. I am not the expert in 18 sports. You are the experts. So make sure that you are educating yourself on that. The certification, I have most of you done already. So great job on that. That's just a reminder that needs to be done before you can start coaching. Tomorrow, if you know athletes that need to take the impact test, there's 2 opportunities tomorrow. One is the one that you already knew about, the 12-to-1. But because the middle school principals want to do a middle school sports night tomorrow night. So we're trying to get more middle school kids to sign up before the sports season starts and get their paperwork in. And so I will go there for that hour and a half as well, and I will be in the computer lab doing impact testing for anybody. High school kids can come and do impact testing tomorrow night as well. So anybody that needs to do the impact testing, tomorrow there's 2 opportunities. As far as physicals go, the Horizon Health is still offering free physicals. So you can pass that information on if you talk to parents that want to know. They're still doing free, or they can go to their own healthcare person, but they need to come and pick up the proper paperwork from my office first and get that blue form filled out before they have the physical. I encourage coaches to join the Coaches Association. Yes, you get additional liability coverage, but it's just a professional organization that you then get to vote on for your peers for Coach of the Year or athletes for Athletes of the Year and things like that. I think it's your job to pay for it, and I just encourage you to think about it if you haven't been part of the Coaches Association, and you can find that information on the Activity Association website. There's a link for the Coaches Association website. The chain of command thing that hasn't changed, but what I would like, here's what drives me nuts with parents. I will have parents call me and say, can I meet with you? Sure, what's this regarding? Well, it's regarding their son or daughter, and obviously it's about playing time and lack of it. I don't ever have meetings with parents of star athletes. It's always the ones that the parents think they're great, the coach doesn't play them for a reason, and mom and dad can't understand why. But here's what really drives me nuts. What drives me nuts is the parents want to have the meeting, but the kid doesn't even know that the parents are meeting with me. So a lot of times, it's really not the athlete that has the problem with the role in the team. A lot of time, it's the parents. So if and when they want to meet with you, as Mr. Nebelsick said before, just listen to their side of the story. Just listen to them. And that's what I do. And then I ask them at the end of the meeting, so if you're in my position, what would you like me to do? Because you don't want the coach to know. You don't want your son or daughter to know. So I don't know how you think I can fix anything, because I'm not telling the coaches who plays. I will not do that. And I tell the parents that. I think a lot of times they just want to be heard. So, but what I encourage, and I said this at the fall orientation last week, I want the athlete to be at the meeting. I want the athlete to hear what mom and dad have to say, and I want the athlete to hear what the coach has to say. I know the athlete's hearing the coach talk at practice, but I want the athlete there when the coach is talking to the parents and the athlete as well. I think things get resolved a whole lot easier and a lot better if everybody's involved in listening to both sides of the story. So that's what I would ask. In all cases, it's not gonna happen that way, because the parents don't want their son or daughter to know that they're meeting. So I still have the meeting, but I just ask them if they bring the athlete with them. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Mr. Nebelsick kind of talked about the official. We have a football, I'm covered. I'm now covered in volleyball, but we have a huge need for officials in the state of South Dakota. We are lacking soccer officials. We are lacking football officials. We are lacking basketball officials. We are lacking volleyball officials. You can do your job by just treating them decently, because that's why officials quit sometimes. If they're tired, they don't get paid enough to be abused for 2 hours while they're out there on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. They probably have better things to do. So just give that consideration when you're having conversations with officials. I had one complaint last year from a parent about a coach that said that person was always on their cell phone at practice. And I said, well, how would you know that? Because the parents were never at practice. And they said their son or daughter told them that the coach, that's all they did. So don't bring your phones to practice. Put them in the office, put them in a bag, put them in your car, go to practice, and then when you're done, then get your phone out. And I would expect the same for the kids. And lastly is a supervision part of it. We have to be the first one there and the last one to leave. We have to be. If something were to happen and you left 3 or 4 kids while they're waiting for parents to pick them up and something happened, maybe those 3 kids got in a fight amongst each other, whatever, you're responsible. I'm responsible. So make sure, and I know that can be a pain, but now with cell phones, it seems like everybody has their phone. They can call and text and kind of give parents an idea when practice is going to be done, when the bus is going to be back in town, and just make sure that somebody is there. If there's 3 coaches on the staff, I don't expect all 3 to stay there. Two can leave. Just make sure there's 1 adult there until the last person is picked up. And if you're having any problems or questions or issues with that, let me know and I will try to help you out.
A tiny caveat on that, as far as who has to stay, don't have one guy stay if there's a little girl waiting for folks, okay? Then 2 of you stay. Just a little caveat with that. Jerry, before you flip the page, I interrupted before, which caused you to miss the funding, the general funding capital outlay.
Same as last year. Last year, we capped the capital outlay. I shouldn't say I. The athletic department has $20,000 in capital outlay that Kelly budgets for us to buy uniforms, soccer goals, anything that's over $1,000. I can't buy tape with capital outlay, cause it can't be something that's usable and thrown away. So, I have 20,000, but because of we don't know where our enrollment numbers are, he's freezing all capital outlay at 50%, so I have 10,000 that I can spend. I think we're in pretty good shape with uniforms, but I do know that when we buy new football uniforms, that it's about $7,000, correct? Just for home jerseys, for 70 or 80 jerseys. So that will eliminate most of our capital outlay if that's the direction that we decide to go for next year. So just as you are getting ready for the season, if there's something that you need, we have money to buy things that we should have nice uniforms and stuff like that. And I don't care if it's 7th grade or varsity. I want every team to be outfitted and look nice. We have money. General fund, we have supply money, we have travel money, we have professional money to pay officials and stuff like that. In that fund, capital outlay is a separate fund. Some of you I know that, but there's probably quite a few that didn't know that, so for now, we're restricted a little bit on how much money I can spend.
I'm gonna comment on that, and I got guys who sit here and know all of this, that they know the legislation and stuff, that we'll no longer go to our community for an opt-out. They gave us $22 million for new schools, they allowed us all these other things. So that 50% free is in case we have a disaster on the 4th Friday of September, because then capital outlay is what supplements our salary base and everything, so that everybody is paid, all the things he described on the general fund side. That's what we use to hedge the bet. So if enrollment comes in the way we think it is, then Kelly comes back and lets you know where we're at. Just so you understand that, why that is that way.
Okay, on the back side, that's what I'm not gonna go through, because that's the same as last year, we went through it last year, but I'll go through some of that stuff with the new coaches. So, does anybody have any questions before I let you leave?
Is that middle school thing, Tony, is that just for fall sports?
No, I think it's for any sport. So, if you wanna try to recruit kids to come out for wrestling, I think it'd be wise to have somebody there to talk to parents and answer questions.
Laura's motivation in doing that is when we didn't get the start of the school year to move up, and we have so many kids that are not exposed to sports until the first day of school. That's what she's trying to do.
Right, and the middle school volleyball coaches and the football coaches know this. We'll have 15 or 16 kids at practice on August 20th, but the first day of school, we'll get 15 or 16 more. And now they missed 2 weeks of practice. So we're trying to get awareness out that practice starts before school, and we need them to get signed up and paperwork in, so they can be there on day 1. But